Hi, everyone. Welcome to All the Forbidden Things. This is the show where we talk about all the things that we're not talking about, including with loved ones and friends, or at a level that we're not typically talking about. So today we are joined by Carmen Gerlach, who is a friend of mine. She works as an aerospace engineer by day, and she does relationship systems coaching as something that is a new venture that she's been launching for herself. So I can already speak highly of it from my own experiences of her kind of pulling her magic on me a little bit. But what we're going to get into today is what that is and then how it differs from certain other programs that are out there and a lot of the fears that people have about when they hear about a coach or another life program, and some of the different things that we associate and where we might have made some mistakes in our impressions. So thank you so much, Carmen, for being on the show.
Rebecca, I'm super happy to be here. We were trying for a long time to do this, and now finally we're actually doing it.
Yes. Um, all right. So I normally kick off the show with a fun question where we try to guess something about each other. There's no reason for me not to do that. What is my favorite genre of film? What do you think that is?
Okay, I say spontaneously film noir.
Oh my God. Yes, especially like a Scandi noir kind of film. But yes, film noir is definitely correct. Wow. Look, you're already off to the
Yeah,
races.
yeah. Okay, because we never talked about this ever.
No, no. Um, I'm gonna guess for you that there's like maybe some sci-fi or fantasy elements, but only if it's very well written. Like you talk about, oh, what is the name of it? Star Trek.
Yes.
And you have a very high standard for sort of the writing and the drama and the character development of things. But I think you like the genre of being in another world.
Yes, I'm absolutely a sci-fi fan because I think that sci-fi actually describes our society as it is now, just set in a different into a different setting to either be able to show an ideal or that's or the opposite when it gets into that it gets very dark,
Mm.
but especially this is not a podcast about about Star Trek, but Star Trek always has reflected society and tried to be a step up in front of what actual society lives right now.
I had a friend who was really into sci-fi and described it as you see the human condition isolated in an environment that is unfamiliar to you, and therefore it provides almost like a close-up or a more precise um, vision of humanity and relationships because it's in this like sort of vacuum of something that's otherwise unfamiliar.
I think that's actually a really nice way of saying it, because where it comes down to, what makes the difference between good writing and bad writing, or good shows and bad shows, is the relationship. Because you need to have the relationship to carry making an something believable that is clearly not real. So yeah, I agree with that.
Great. We're off to a great start. um, all right. So, segueing into coaching, I am going to take a guess, and I have an advantage here because we've done a little bit of some of the exercises and things, and you've told me about it. But I'm going to take a guess at what relationship systems coaching is. Um, so, it is a system of thinking or approaching, I mean, literally, kind of how it's termed, the relationships in your life, but not just to other people, but also to the different um, elements of your life, things like your work or how you respond to things. Um, what I have experienced of it is different exercises that have revealed to me the pattern or approach that I take to a certain aspect of my life or to something that triggers me. So you'll somehow turn it into like an actual visual puzzle to solve or some kind of equation or something. Like we've done an exercise before of like moving items around on the dinner table
Yeah.
to express different relationships that we have. That I have in my life, or a dynamic in a relationship that's challenging. And it really helped me to be like, oh, yeah, like, these people kind of pull off onto the side typically when we're in this situation and we have this triangulation or something. But I couldn't give like the best overall definition of it, but I know that it is not like a traditional, this is what you should do with your life, but it would be closer to something like internal family systems therapy.
Well, internal family systems therapy is definitely part of the basis of the relationship systems coaching, because the two founders of the program that I'm trained in, which is called ORSC. Yeah, that's a mouthful. But they're coming from the therapy side, and they come from one adventure they did was also family systems therapy. So that is part of the basis. And what you described, it actually you described a lot in one sentence. So when I picked that apart, what is relationship systems coaching? What is special about it? What is special about it is you do not coach the person. So I know you and I, we did one-on-one coaching, but and that is a valid part. However, this coaching style goes mainly for the relationships between people. So, and it is usually, that's why it's called relationship systems, where a system can either be two people, and it doesn't need to be a romantic relationship. It can be romantic, it can be friends, it can be a mother and daughter duo. But it also actually spans further into groups, teams, and whole organizations. So, and how to best describe it is when you go into whatever room, you go to a party. You go to a party and you walk in and you immediately know if people have a good time or not. So, and if I would ask you, how do you know that they have a good time? You would say, I can just feel it. And what you feel, that is the connection between the people that creates an atmosphere in the environment you're in. And that is the relationship system. And so what this type of coaching is, what I find so fascinating about it, is that this type of coaching, I say, I'm not coaching you as a person and the other person. However, what I'm coaching is the relationship between you. So to make the relationship visible as an own item to be taken serious and giving it a voice, by how you talk, saying, how is that for the two of you, addressing people at the same time instead of addressing one person and then the other, which still also is part of the coaching, but the specialty is addressing one, let's say, the relationship between them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. How would that differ from like a marriage counselor typical, or like relationship counseling when people go into relationship therapy together?
So I have to say, I have never been to relationship counseling. So I want to make sure that people don't say, "Hey, but that's exactly what I also experienced there,"
Yeah.
because it's of course always also when the question of how how the person who is the coach or the consultant at that moment, where they're coming from. So it's a wide range. However, in general terms, the difference between coaching and consulting is that a consultant makes suggestions about where to go or what options are, whereas a coach will not will make sure that you as the client or the client system, I say we're talking about systems, that the client system reveals itself and comes up with the solutions or the next step. So a coach does not provide a solution. A coach helps you to come to your own solution that is present for you and right for you. So it is a
So,
facilitating role.
so there's a little bit of like a therapeutic, like a therapy sort of code there where you are not, like a good therapist is technically not supposed to give advice to the client. Some people like that from their therapist. A lot of therapists will be careful not to say, oh, yeah, go break up with your boyfriend now, you know? So similarly, you know, the idea is that the person finds it on their own through your guidance and then they are, you know, more empowered. But how would you further distinguish it then from therapy, um, in terms of if that's something that therapy does? You know, I guess the distinction is that therapy usually focuses on the person, you focus on the system.
The distinction is different because, let's say, there is a clear distinction between coaching and therapy. So we just had it. You know, there's therapy, there's coaching, and there's consulting, and all three have a right to be around and have an audience where it is really helpful. So what it is, the distinction between therapy and coaching, it is as a coach, there's an ethics code, and so I need to, as part of the initial, let's say, getting to know the client system, part of it is to decide if the client system can be coached, because there are certain red flags where you say if it goes into a mental health issue, that is not the range for coaching. So coaches have to absolutely stay out of mental health issues because we are not trauma informed, or let's say some coaches are, but they have then an own extra training for that. So I definitely do not have that. When I realize there it goes into mental health issues, then I need to step back and say this is not where I am. So where the let's say where the other question comes in of saying what is where is an overlap, it is this: yes, you ask about how the person experiences, person or both or all of them, how they experience themselves, and there is an overlap that sounds the same, but I say it is not. And let me put it this way: therapy usually goes to where does something come from, where coaching is you are where you are right now. Let's take where you are right now and what can you do with it going forward. So coaching is forward oriented, where therapy explores what the reason is why you became who you are today. And I just take you the way you are today and say, where can we go from here?
That's cool. I like that. I think one of my beefs with therapy sometimes, and thankfully I have a therapist now who's a little bit more balanced on this and a little bit more similar to the coaching in the taking where you are now. Like she'll say that the trauma is not the event, it's the effect. And then it's what has happened to you, you know. But one thing that I think one can get into with therapy sometimes is that it becomes this lifelong process that can, when the when with the wrong therapist and when overused, if you will, can become a little bit more like navel gazing, where you're searching for, oh, you feel like you have to figure out the cause of absolutely everything that's happened to you that has affected the way that you relate to something. And then you
Mhm.
go back there and you're like, oh, well, that was because of my mom. And then, somebody reacted this way. And then, but it's actually kind of hard to move on from it sometimes, right? Like there are different therapy approaches where you can say, like, okay, now that I know that, I can do this cognitive behavioral exercise or whatever. And it kind of works, but the problem is that it leads to an understanding of yourself, but you might be for years understanding yourself better in therapy and still ruining your relationships. It's
Okay.
definitely something that I think can happen in therapy. Now, I still use therapy. I have some mental health issues. It's necessary, I think, for me. But like you're saying, there's a place for all three of those things: the consulting, the therapy, and the coaching. And I do think coaching is probably something that gets people farther along faster in terms of the actually moving forward in their lives.
I see. With the caveat, it must be clear that we're not venturing into mental health issues.
Yeah.
But as you said, you have some mental health issues. However, you still, with me, you got something out of me talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just me as a coach, I need to be careful.
How do you know when, like, what's the flag that arises for you that would say, oh, this is not my realm? Because I think a lot of things,
Hmm.
and we'll get into this in a minute, about people that proclaim themselves coaches without even any kind of training at all. But also, there's the temptation, I would think, to sort of feel like you can solve more than you can, and really needing to tap into that humility or some kind of program rules that help you to define, when this thing happens, I exit that conversation and send them somewhere else, or I send them somewhere else for that. Like, what are some of those flags?
So what I found interesting right now was that you used the word realm because that's exactly how it's called. When
Ah.
you recognize that somebody goes into their realm, and I will explain in a moment what that means, then you pretty much need to exit and move on. So, and what it is, um, it is this when you talk to somebody, and I'm pretty sure you had this experience. You talk to somebody and you trigger something. When somebody gets triggered, but you can pretty much get him back, it goes up and they come back down. That is okay, you know? So, because that's like we all have that. Everybody can get triggered more or less. However, when you recognize you say something and somebody starts disappearing and you start losing them, that is a sign to get very, very careful and to think about if that is actually ethical to continue or to actually suggest to that coaching is not the right thing and to give them contacts for therapists.
Mm.
So there are also other red flags, other deciding factors. For example, when you're addressing a group where, let's say, you have a business setting where there is an hierarchical problem that one person doesn't feel safe to speak up the way they would. That is, of course, also one that is then something that you can try to address. However, if they're not open for it, if the hierarchically higher person is not open for it, then coaching cannot go forward because then what is the idea behind coaching? So also, of course, when you have suspicions of abuse, power difference, it's about safety. It needs to be clear that a client is always safe
Mm.
and that you do not cause harm.
Yeah, it's a tough thing because you really have to, when you're looking for a coach, I think really vet where someone is coming from and how trustworthy they are. And what I would say in my experience is that the more overconfident your coach is, like, yeah, we're gonna totally figured this out and I know how to put you on the right track and all of that. And they really are, the more likely you are to potentially be in the hands of somebody who is interested in witnessing their impact on you more than allowing you to open up and find your way. And I think that's a huge challenge for anyone who's in the philosophy space or the mental health space, or like I find myself having to face that sometimes when I'm like, I give pretty good advice, and a friend will come to me about something. And then I think I have the ability to potentially influence this person who's very vulnerable right now. She's confused. She's known me for years. She trusts that I have a good outside opinion on it. I'm feeling triggered because of something in my life, and I think that she shouldn't be doing this, or I like the idea that I could help her fix her problem. And almost for the sake of that, I enter the situation and have too much influence. And I think that's something that is a real like potential threat with people who, I mean, you see that with cult leaders too, who just get high on their own supply, and then they're like, oh yeah, there's a thrill that comes from having an impact on someone's life, um, and especially if you think you know the right answer, so I mean, I wonder what you think about that. And I think one of the reasons that, like, I've always enjoyed, any of the exercises we've done or whatever, is because I have trust in you that, like, yes, you want to help me, but you also have faith in me, and you're not just like getting off on, like, yeah, I helped fix that problem. It might be very satisfying to you, but that's not like a primary motivator. And I think sometimes it can slip in as a primary motivator for people who seem like they're altruistic, but actually it's just another way of feeding your ego.
Yeah. So again, how do I unpack that? Because you said so many different aspects, and let's go on. One thing that makes coaching, let's say, probably less accepted or seem to be less serious, let's say serious, that was actually now a translation from German. What I mean is reputable,
Mm.
is that coaching as such is not trademarked. So you can go out without any training and you can just call yourself a coach. You can do a one weekend or an internet course and you can call yourself a coach. So a life coach, a coach, and there are many out there. And let's be clear, not having formal training doesn't mean that everybody who's out there who doesn't have formal training is not good.
Yeah.
However, as with everything, the chances are that when you have people who have certain serious certifications, and in the US, let's say the biggest organization is the International Coaching Foundation, and they have I think I just read it some days ago. They have 125,000 coaches have certification from the International Coaching Foundation. And so when you have their certifications, an ACC, a PCC, an MCC, then you know those are people who have hundreds of hours of A, coaching, B, also they have hours, let's say hundreds of hours of training. And so I myself do not have the ICF certification yet. I am on my path to the ICF certification through the other organization, I say CR Global, that does the ORSC certification with the relationship systems coaching. So, and there are standards behind it. As I say, there are ethical standards behind it. There is where you get more skilled what the training does, it gives you the skills to know what is okay and what is not okay. It also makes very clear, I don't know what people do when they're not there, right? However, it makes very clear that as a coach that you're not supposed to influence. You are supposed to offer and let the system reveal itself. So what it means, a coach doesn't have an agenda. The agenda of the coach is your agenda. You set the agenda, you decide what you want to get out of it, and the coach is there to help you on that way. And is it a very rewarding practice? Yes, it is, because it's so amazing to see how those aha moments when somebody just realizes something about themselves. I experienced that myself when I got coached or when I get coached. But also when you learn something about the person you know for 15 years, and then you have coached, you get coached from a relationship systems coach, and you turn around and you say, I never knew that about you. Those moments are just worth everything. But those are the nuggets that are just a consequence of allowing the client to be where they are. And you asked earlier what the difference is with consulting. I actually think I have a good description for it. What I say, I have never been in consulting. I have never been in therapy. I only had no coaching. But what I heard from people is that sometimes that consultants, that there can be a tendency of declaring one person right and the other one wrong. I do not say that that's always the case, but that is probably something that can happen. And that is something in relationship systems coaching. The rule is pretty much everybody is right partially. So a coach cannot take sides. I'm not on your side or on your side. I'm here to allow you to find a path in your own truth. Everybody is in their own truth. How to find a common ground to help them find a common ground to move forward and move forward. And you know what? Sometimes it can happen that moving forward means to actually leave a relationship. But that is something that relationship, that system itself needs to create. What the people involved need to create. System sounds too abstract, actually. The involved people, they need to decide what is right for them. And if they decide to move forward in one direction or in another direction, the coach is there to support them with it.
In consulting, when we talk about consulting, just so people kind of know exactly what that is, that would be like if you were to come into an organization and teach a certain way of, like, let's say a sales team, and you teach them how to work as a team, and you have some kind of like system of, here's the acronym for how you handle X situation to get to the result that you want. Is that sort of like the type of thing that you would understand consulting to be?
Yes, there's a lot of consulting out there in the business world where people are hired in for a certain time to help implement a system. And they come with the system and say, hey, I know how to make this department more successful by implementing these procedures. I bring the procedures, and I help to get the people trained in using those procedures. That's consulting. That's not coaching. So
Yeah,
coming
because
with a set outcome is consulting.
yeah, it sounds like you help people potentially replace a system, but with another one of their own making, whereas a consultant would hand them the new system and
Yes.
throw out the old. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As a coaching asked, what is, another principle is that, of the coaching that I do, is that systems are naturally curious and intelligent. What that sounds like, or what that means, is that when you go into a group and you just start talking to people and you ask them, if you perfect world, you could change something, what would it be? People know. They know what they would want to change in a system. They know in their department what is going wrong. Sometimes it can be that a leadership is not listening. Sometimes it can be that they say, hey, we're so overworked that I cannot, that even if I just do what I just do what I have to do, because I cannot even come up with new ideas. So what a coach then does, a coach comes in and says, okay, what is here? What do you know? What do you know? And what it does is to take away this saying this person always says X, oh, you again, you always complain. Instead of saying it's a person who has an opinion, it's an expression of what is there, that everybody wants to move forward. And usually when you are having an existing group or a team, they are they usually want to get better, otherwise they wouldn't be there anymore. They want to be better together, and a coach helps them to, if there's an openness to it, of course, a coach can help to make it visible. What are those unspoken items that could bring it forward? So the coach doesn't come in and say, here's what I see. The coach at that moment, in the moment I coach, I don't have an opinion. I just listen to what is there and help them to hear it themselves, and then to help align and say, how do you want to move forward with what you right now experienced and learned from the system?
That's a real challenge to decide not to have an opinion. I have that sometimes when, I have conversations with people and I do something that's like a suspension of disbelief, like a radical listening, where you're just there and you're deciding if this person's thing is real within their world, what would that mean for them moving forward, or why would they act the way that they do? Um, I guess that's part of what you get out of training, right? Is that you learn to do that, because that is a huge skill in and of itself, to be able to withhold judgment on something. Because surely you walk into a situation and you're like, these people's relationship is a mess, and this person has serious intimacy issues, and the other one is an enabler, and whatever. That's a real challenge to decide not to have an opinion.
And that's the interesting part about, I say, getting formal training.
Mm-hmm.
You go into the moment you are in coaching mode, it really just isn't there. It is about going in with a curiosity of saying, I'm going to listen, and allowing them the space to explore who they are and where they are and why. And as a coach, that is exactly what you need to be able to. If you're not able to do that, then you shouldn't call yourself a coach.
Well, and that is so counter to what you see on like Instagram or TikTok or whatever, especially the relationship coach type people. So I generally avoid both of those platforms, especially for my own personal use. And I avoid people like the plague who call themselves like a relationship guru of sorts, or like well, if he wanted to, he would. And like, this is how I locked down a man that did such and such, or there's a lot of like toxic messaging, I think, especially towards females. But then even the ones that are not toxic, are like, here's why, like I'll come across this on YouTube all the time, like this is why you've married the wrong person and you'll always have married the wrong person. And then there's always like a distinct reason that is maybe informed by some kind of psychology or relational thing that they may or may not have studied, typically not. And it's sort of something they've pulled from their own life as the way to secure relationships or whatever long term, or the way to deal with conflict. And I think that people are attracted to that because it's like a one fix kind of thing. They don't really have to think about it. They're like, oh, I've been going about relationships the whole way, wrong way. I start out by looking for all the red flags, and then I put up boundaries, and then really I need to start giving people the benefit of the doubt. And then now they've got a whole new problem. So I think, but it is very appealing to people to have somebody that's like, I got you, girl. Um, what are your feelings about that? I mean, I'm sure that you have an equal distaste, if not more, than I do. But I mean, do you feel like anybody out there is valuable, whether they're more on the intellectual space or whether they're more just this is how I get through my relationship goals, you know? I mean, how do you feel about people out there who sort of like have a real plan that you're supposed to follow?
When I watch it, I just watch it as, um, the same way I watch a TV show, something that is not real. Where I say maybe somebody says something that I can take something from it. I'm not talking about myself, right? Where I say, do I watch those things? Rarely, but yes, because if it already starts with, and here are the 10 tips for X. Yes, I actually have to admit, I look at them. I find it fascinating. Um, but then I just pick out what fits into my framework. And what you describe is this risk out there that people just then start saying, okay, this person knows what it is. I say, for me, it is just somebody probably came up with an aspect. I say, I never thought about that. And then I just put it into my own framework. But the idea of having people out there, whenever something sounds like, you can put it as a banner in with, I don't know, the yellow sparkles, and it says, and here's your solution. Yeah, I don't know. I immediately start getting very suspicious about it because it just doesn't exist, because every relationship is unique.
Mm.
And I think we all experience that, all that you look at experience, say in our environment, just in our lives, we see relationships that work for 40 years and you're like, I didn't give them a day and I didn't give them 6 months, right?
No.
And you know you don't know, and there are others you think, oh my god, they're like made for each other, and then you find out afterwards that it actually didn't work out for very serious reasons. So I don't think there is you cannot, I say, somebody who offers you, I can solve your problem. A coach, I say, a serious coach doesn't offer you to solve your problem. A serious coach, let's say a trained coach or however you want to call it, will offer you to help you find your path in solving the problem. And for that, there are skills and tools for it that are learned. So you can learn everything. So you can also learn communication. And becoming a coach, I say I can probably explain what got me into coaching. What got me into becoming a coach was that I myself had a leadership coach. And that was just life changing, because what good coaching is good coaching. When I say good, that's of course my opinion. Um, what coaching can do, in my mind should do, is that it brings you back to yourself. So we're actually, so we are, through our lives we start to create our personality and hone our personality and get more and more into our personality the older we get. And sometimes, or I would actually say for a lot of people, it is this when we say, well, that's my personality, then you wonder, is that really what you want? Or is it something that your life has thrust you into? That you say, because I was in a certain environment, I learned through my environment that I'm better received when I act in a certain way. Or I felt the need to protect myself more because I was in a certain environment. And what coaching does is to separate who you are from how you behave to the outside, and to help you to find ways how you can express who you are more to the outside, so that you need to less describe yourself or act in your personality pattern if you don't want to. That you have a choice if you want to be act in a certain way, or if you say, you know what, I do not really know why I just said that, because what I really wanted to say, it was something completely different, but it felt like I didn't have a choice to say something. And coaching helps that you find yourself, and helps you to create patterns for yourself, how you can express yourself more as you are and you want to be observed.
I mean, that involves so much work on behalf of the person who is seeking coaching. Now, when you're doing the coaching, well, it doesn't feel like so much work for the person who is benefiting from the coaching, but it's like you're building the muscles of the person so that the teaching the man to fish kind of thing, right? Whereas, yeah, in comparison, the thing that I think sets off that emergency red flag, oh my God, so another person calling themselves a life coach, is that actually really hinders and atrophies the person who is getting the coaching or getting the tips, because they're basically, and a lot of, I mean, literally a lot of times the advice is you are who you are and you need to find people that love you for it. And I've heard some people, like recently, I think it was Alain de Botton or whatever, was like, you know, don't be yourself all the time in a relationship. It's not polite. It's, got all these problems. Like, you need to sort of filter yourself with your partner so that you show up a little bit more appropriately. Like, pull it together, put your pants on. And, you're so vast, and so much of that vastness is ultimately somewhat chaotic and destructive to other people. So be careful. Um, but it makes sense that a lot of that advice goes with the, like, this is my personality, I'm fixed in space and time, and then I just want the hot tips to move forward. So you're basically asking somebody to replace yourself. You're asking somebody to replace your critical thinking, your exploration of the world, your a lot of times, like, if you have a way that you're going to standards that you're looking for when you're first dating somebody, for example, then you're not actually paying attention to the fullness of the picture of this person. You're not truly listening. You're not truly taking in yourself. You're like, okay, did they hit these 5 things that I'm supposed to look for initially, right? And I mean, I'm
What would,
even,
now I need to ask you, what would be those 5 things? I would not even know.
oh God, I have seen people, like, be um especially advice given to women a lot of times um is he, making plans for the first date? Does he communicate consistently so that, like, he's not dropping out of text for a day or so here and there? Can he, all these things that he's basically doing for you is a lot of the
Mhm.
stuff out there. Then there are other coaches who take the opposite approach, which they would say, you need to, be secure in yourself and blah, blah, blah. And you can't possibly know and it's from texting how much the person cares about you. And it's like, you could take any kind of angle, and some will sound more evolved than others, but there's still somebody telling you the thing that you should really be figuring out yourself over time. So that then, and in your own way and in your own life. And then these people don't have answers to problems that appear dysfunctional to them, right? So they would say, oh, you're just in a bad relationship. You need to get out of that relationship, instead of potentially through coaching or through just your own life navigation being like, okay, there are aspects of this situation right now. Can I solve these? Am I okay with these? Would somebody from the outside not approve of this? Potentially, but is it okay for me? Maybe. On what level is it okay? What do I do about it? How do I communicate it with this person? So it's very often reductive. I find I do sometimes benefit from like the productivity people or whatever, which then can become its own toxic thing that
Wait,
you
what are the
infect.
productivity people?
So like do you remember like the Tim Ferriss craze? But it's like people like for optimizing your life so that you're the most productive human you can possibly be.
Oh,
So this is the other realm of coaching, right? There's the relationship coaching, and then there's the like, here's how you get to your goals, and you're holding yourself back because you're not learning to manifest and attract the energy that you want in your life because you have limiting beliefs. Another person might say, you're just waiting for lightning to strike, sitting around meditating in your room, and you really need to be getting up at 6 in the morning, and you do 1% of improvement per day, and all of it
that's
has in
the atomic
common.
habits person, right?
Yeah.
So
So all of it has in common is that somebody has already figured this out. Then they have the burden of continuing this persona and presentation that they're living their best life forever and ever, because now they have like a whole millions of people who are dependent on them as an example of their process. And then you also are, just kind of getting spoon fed a little bit how to do life. And I've just heard so many of them gotten pulled into some of the things that I have heard so many different messages all in different directions that it all became nonsense to me. And I eventually started being like, I need to figure this out myself.
good. You took the right message from it. And by the way, I say when people come with a fixed plan,
It's a flag.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it coaching. That's consulting.
So, like, let's say somebody says, oh, I started my own business. I make so and so many a month. I've changed my marriage drastically. Helped get over a health issue that was just due to chronic stress. And I can teach you to do the same thing. You would place them, they'll say they're a life coach, but you would place them in the category of a self proclaimed consultant. Or just an idiot. No, I'm sorry. I don't speak ill of that. I mean, I am
It's this.
actually speaking ill of it.
You never know how people get to coaching. But it's this. If somebody says, if you follow the same rule
Path.
book that I did, that then it's not coaching. Somebody can come to coaching through different paths. Um, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily a bad coach. However, if somebody says, I have a book that says, here's the way how you find happiness, that is not coaching, that's consulting.
And do you think there's value in that for people, or do you think that it's
Yeah.
actually undermines? Okay.
No, I absolutely think that it has a place. I also read Atomic Habits, didn't work, but I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, that's too much work, so I didn't do it. But I found the concept interesting. So I read a lot of those things
Mm.
and see if there's something. Actually, what I read it for mainly is to actually get better access to what I think myself. And it is easier to read something that you disagree with or agree with than just sitting in front of a white wall and saying, thoughts come. So in that sense, I really like it. It's where I know people who say they need to stay out of it because they can get very obsessed with it. They say it only works if I follow every single rule in this book. That is a that is I say that's foreign to me. but I think then it can just get critical. It's the same, now we could get into a totally different discussion about dieting.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah,
Because
that
it's the
whole
same
world.
thing. Somebody says,
Yeah.
here's the way how you lose weight. It's the same story. Here it's just, here's how you change your life in a different, here's how you change your headspace, how you get more productive. When you say, here are the rules how you get more productive, I would usually ask you, instead of saying, here's how you get more productive, I would say, the first question I ask is, so what does productivity mean for you? How do you know if you are productive or not? And then go from there and say, um, what does productivity mean? Is there a way how you can see yourself productive or not productive? And I say, as you recognize at this point, I already stop talking because I would need your answer to be able to go forward, because I say, I don't have an opinion anymore. The moment I go into this, I have the first question, and then I ask you for your answer. And depending on your answer, I follow your lead of saying, where do we go next? So I cannot tell you what coaching gets you with content. I can only tell you what is, how a coaching unfolds. That you say you first have the introduction where you identify the client's agenda, then you make sure that you come to an agreement what you are actually gonna talk about. Then you pick something. I say the client picks what is, because there's probably more things that are interesting, which direction the client wants to go. The clients want to go. And then also I say it's a requirement to say, how will you know how would success look like, and how do you know that we actually succeeded in it? That you can actually go back to it. And then I say you work with that as a starting point, go through the motion, and at the end of the coaching, you ask, what have you learned now? What is now for new? And did we achieve that you got something out of what you wanted to get out of? So was the coaching successful? You don't say it necessarily in those words, because you are living in a context with people in their words and sentences and the way how they communicate. But from a content, you ask if they feel that they actually succeeded in something, and then ask, and where can we go from here? So, but I say the content itself, I say I cannot make up, because it depends on the person in front of me, or say the people in front of me, or the group where they want to go. I really don't know.
Well,
And
and
that is what makes it so interesting.
yeah,
You
and
really don't know.
well, what I like about hearing that is it's distinct from two different things. So, you setting a sort of KPI, if you will, like a goalpost for where you want to end up in your first project together, if you will, um, allows the person to commit to potentially a certain period of time or a certain amount of effort, not fixed necessarily, but that we got here and now we close it out and we decide if we want to do another thing together, or if you feel like you got what you needed out of it or whatever. Like there's a beginning and an end, if you will, that can continue to be renewed, but the person who is doing it with you is sort of in control of whether or not and when it needs to end. But you have some kind of goal.
Yes.
Compared to those programs where it's like, we do this for 2 weeks and you do this intensive thing where you come to these sessions and blah, blah, blah. And by the end, you have your huge breakthroughs and then we have the next class for you, whatever. But it's like you have this program that is very fixed and you have these specific exercises and there's this pressure to get something out of it, right? So I went to this thing that was a weekend long, and they're hounding you to make these life-changing phone calls because they're on a Saturday afternoon between 3 and 4 during our break time. That's the moment where you call up that person that you haven't spoken to in 15 years and you take this approach to the conversation and you see how it goes. I mean, for some people, they need that push. They have a cool conversation. I did the exercise, definitely got a benefit out of it, but it doesn't feel like you're in charge of your growth. And then what happens is, well, and I'll quickly say the alternate is that like sort of lifelong therapy or support group thing where you don't really know if you're making progress and the person is not interested in you graduating out of their situation. A good therapist wants you to be able to move forward, but some people will just like, it's like they'll, or the person themselves gets endlessly lost in this thing forever because they never identify with getting over it. But these programs where they have this very fixed, we're taking you through these crazy mental exercises and journaling gymnastics and all of this in this intense hyped weekend experience or week-long thing, you become extremely dependent on them. Like you feel like they own the ability to unlock yourself. They know better than you because they've led you through these things that you didn't know existed, that have created results that you didn't know that you could have. You likely entered the program because you were in some form of crisis or real dead end, right? So like with a coach, I can see there's just some maybe adjustments that you want to make, or you want to be more of a leader, or maybe you're at a huge impasse in your life. But some of these very fixed programs will sort of, they're built to and have a price tag on them that they're like your Hail Mary option. And you go in, they change your life, and then they tell you at the end of the weekend, by the way, everything that happened this weekend is completely useless if you don't continue on with the program. And they hard sell you and they, take advantage of you or whatever. I've done 2 of these, you guys. Never made it to the next phase of the program, but I had to like beat these people off with a stick, not literally, at the end. And they're making you feel like your life is on the line if you don't spend the next $1,500, and like, how much is your life worth to you? And it's very manipulative. And you have become completely like an embryo, like you're like in utero during that weekend. And then you feel like you're incapable without this program. And then there are people who are lifers in these things, and they, and then there's obviously a financial exploitation element that is almost impossible to avoid when you have a setup like that. And then you launch into cult territory where they're just like raiding your finances. So, and maybe, some of your other boundaries. So, yeah, I just think I like that there is an empowerment of the individual being coached, that they are forming their own path. Individuals, excuse me, the system, the relationship system. And that there is a sense that we're actually going to make some kind of progress. You're going to decide when that happens. And then our project will be over for the moment unless you want to do more.
Right. And, I say, let's get into the cult in a moment, because I, of course, have opinions on that one. So, but for the coaching itself, it is this, yes, of course, as a coach, because when you do the first assessment with people, you talk to them and you hear different things that are possible or that are lingering. And as a coach, also my own coaching experience, I had 20 hours. So, and that was a year. And let's say after 10, I was at a point of, okay, this is different. But after 20 is long. That's a lot. So, and that is, let's say a year is a lot. And that was just really when you can really go into, you have the time to really unearth things and go deeper and deeper in finding yourself. I'm now talking from the aspect of the client. So also as a coach, when you first get to know somebody, you need to build the trust first. And so that means that coaching sessions get better, because you need to learn the same language, understand how you function each other. There is an agreement between how the people work with each other, and there's also an agreement how the people want to work with the coach. And then how to put that into real, as it just into practice. Of course, it's with everybody. When you know each other better, and I'm sure you had that with your therapist, you need to first get to know your therapist, to trust your therapist. It's the same with a coach. So what the other part that you described when it is about cult territory. So those people, I said, I would never go to anything like that, because it is this, they feed off the fact that, of course, when you are in a group, that you can create this atmosphere. What I said in the beginning of this video, the moment you have a group, and you have a group that is very, has a lot of high expectations of that something happens, so they already come in, they actually create this possibility as a team. They create a possibility that people have those experiences. And yeah, then you get out of it. So you have this weekend, you have this awesome experience that is created by this wave, by this energy of all the people being together and wanting to experience something positive. And yes, those experiences are real. I'm not saying they're fake. Those experiences in those moments for the person are real. However, then you send them out into their normal life where you don't have this atmosphere around you. And what then happens is they cannot recreate it, or they cannot maintain it. And that is where it gets risky. Because then when somebody says, hey, I have the next course, it just costs you double what the first one cost you, then you pretty much draw them in and say, now I create again this environment where I can, where you find this atmosphere. And by the way, in our coaching, we call it third entity. It's this, you find it, you have this awesome experience for a weekend. You're just empowered, and you get out of it into your normal life. And can you maintain it or not? What you did is you actually did it in a good way. You went there, you took something out of it, but you walked away and then said, what of it can I now maintain, or how do I want to, what I learned, adjust for me in my life? So you made this learning process yourself. And that is how it's supposed to be. I say, now we're back to coaching. Coaching is, you have this experience in the coaching. How do you then move forward in your life to take that without a coach, that you still learn and grow from it? But yeah, when I hear that those events, those where you have probably 10, 20,000 people, it's also when we're now going into religious territory, same story. That is this way, it's pretty much the more the better, where the communal feeling takes over and gives you an experience. But then the question is, where do you go from there? And yes, people can take advantage of that. And I find that very, very concerning when people take advantage of other people by saying the only way how you can become a better person or experience this again is by coming back and paying more. Coaching doesn't do that. Coaching is there to empower you, that you can go out, learn from what you learned, and see how you can implement tiny steps into your life, so that from the tiny steps you can make more experiences, and another step and another step. Coaching is there to empower you, not to empower me.
And it sounds like a key component of that is Because people could argue, of course, I'm sure there are coaches out there, and not necessarily the qualified coaches that you're talking about, but those people that just name themselves a life coach or whatever, who, it's like the guru thing. There's obviously very much even an individual relationship where the coach is wrongly motivated to create a dependency where it's similar to taking the next course, but it's that we need to continue our sessions together or you're not going to whatever. What I've gleaned from our conversation here is that, again, you are building the muscles in the person so that they can operate properly on their own in the world. They have built their own new system, so they can essentially run with that. And it's just a question then of how many systems they want to work on with you, or what elements of the system they want to unfold and explore next. But you don't lose the progress that you've made because you have a dependency on this person to be holding your hand all the time.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, we have covered some real ground. Do you have any other kind of maybe misnomers that people have, or anything that you want to share, just kind of to explain coaching further, or just kind of get a point across?
Yeah, let's say what I say about coaching, and it actually goes probably back to therapy, to the difference to therapy. When I go out and say, hey, I'm actually, I say I'm ORSC trained, I'm in ORSC certification. I'm looking for interested people to help me with the certification. I'm looking for clients. So in what I say, one sentence, because people are like, well, you know what? In my relationship, I don't have a problem. I'm like, for coaching, you do not need to have a problem. So what coaching gives you is you can be in a wonderful relationship. What coaching gives you is it gives you um, a chance that you have a discussion about something with your partner. I'm now talking about partners. And I say you, just because of how the discussion goes and how the coach I would facilitate, that you have a chance to listen differently to what you hear, and that you probably, I say, the main experience is somebody saying, I did not know that about you. And those can be people who know each other for 15 years. Or that you realize that, I say you do not need to at a problem of really having a problem to find coaching interesting. It is more, are you willing to explore your relationship, and are you interested in probably see if there is something else in your relationship that you are interested in? Because in every relationship that we have, not just romantic, in every relationship, there are things that we don't address, there are things we don't talk about, there are assumptions we make about the other person. And what coaching can help with is to say, maybe you learn that you made an assumption that isn't, that you should, that you don't even know why you make that assumption. Maybe you make that assumption because you compared the person in front of you with someone else from your past. And then instead of really seeing the person, when then your partner says a certain sentence, you respond to the sentence, but you don't respond to that to your partner. You respond to your mom. That's just an example. So, and then on the other hand, I say when it is about groups and teams, bigger, there, what you have to be aware that we all go to work, or also in hobbies, we go there with our life. We're not we don't leave at the door who we are. So we go in, we just are who we are, with all our history, our immediate worries, our old worries, where we come from. And then we are put together. And so we automatically make assumptions about other people. And that's not a bad thing. It's known that we all have a bias. Everybody has a bias. We can only become aware that we have a bias or biases, but we cannot stop it because it's a brain function to make it possible that we can actually interact with people, that we need to make instant decisions. So when everybody comes with their own story and history into a group, that means you hear somebody say something and you make an assumption. You hear somebody say something and you make an assumption. And so what a coach can help with is to make aware that what you hear, maybe it is not what you thought you heard. By taking away the sentence that you heard from the person and saying, this is what somebody in the group had to say, because it's here, there's this pressure there to say it. But if one person would not have been there, someone else would have said it. And with that, you say, oh, it's not that person that always complains. But you say, wait a second, there is a complaint in the room. I don't know if that's too abstract what I describe.
No. And I think what really resonated with me, and of course at an organizational level, there's a ripple effect into things like, productivity, teamwork, ability, operations efficiency. But actually, that's kind of a perfect example that in an organization, you can always make your operations more efficient. You can always create a better product together. You can always have more improved teamwork and understanding. You can always have something work faster, right? So, it's kind of gross and sounds like the people that I've been hating on this whole episode to say that you can optimize your relationships. But you can evolve
I would like
them.
to answer to that. Because what you just described, exactly, you can always make something better in an organization. And there's two ways. Either you tell people how they have to change to be better, which is usually the standard way, to be honest. Or you can say, send someone in who asks, you live this here. Here is the goal that we're trying to achieve. What would you come up with to achieve that goal? That's the difference between consulting and coaching.
And, I assume the same applies to relationships. You can just put it right on over there. And you can always know someone more deeply and love them more deeply and understand them more deeply. And there's an endless benefit to get it. We all know that we like getting to know each other better and appreciating each other more. So, well, thank you, Carmen. This has been amazing. And I feel like I've learned a lot, even though you talk to me about it all the time. There's so many things I didn't know. So
good. I'm glad you got something out of it.